Welcome, Anthony, to METALLERIUM Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you about this new album One, and more details for into the metal world. By the way, this new I hear completely this one. It's really amazing. Really amazing. I love all songs, everything. So for that, how have you been during this pandemic? First 2 years, now a war in Europe, perhaps in the next couple of years, an alien invasion or zombie apocalypse, who knows?
Yeah, it's a crazy time, man, to say the least. You know, it's affecting everyone in the world. You know, I think we live in a really interesting time now because we're all so connected. You know, we all can interact like right now. You know what I mean? You know, we can have video interviews at the touch of a of a button. You know, and that's great. But now it's like, yeah, you just, when stuff goes on in the world, you feel it differently, I think, now, because the world is so interconnected, you know. And yeah, it's a crazy time, man. And I just hope that humanity will the best in humanity will prevail, and you know, things will get better. You know, that's all you can hope for. Yeah.
Yeah. And for this, I think this is a common question. What are you decide to form a band like and release a new album during this, I think, during the last years of the pandemic?
Well, this band, let me think now. This band was formed before the pandemic started. This band formed around 2019 in the summer. Some of these songs on the album were already kind of written, but they weren't arranged in the format that there are now on the album. And I've known the guitar player and the bass player for quite some time, for quite a few years. We played in a lot of different projects. The guitar player's name is Jing, and Chris, the bass player. And, you know, we played in quite a few different projects together, all kinds of styles. You know, it wasn't necessarily just, you know, kind of heavier stuff like this project, which is kind of more on the heavier side, you know, if you really had to give it a label, you know what I mean? But yeah, we all come from very eclectic backgrounds, myself included. I play a lot of jazz music, you know, I play a lot of different, all kinds of stuff. And you know, I had some compositions, and the album originally wasn't intended as an album. Originally, it was 4 songs. The 4 songs that were originally written for it were Travel, Ghost, Dark, and Light. Those were actually the 4 songs, and it was originally intended to be like a suite, like just a 4-song, even like an EP. And through some inquiring, we found Lynn, the singer. And originally, you know, we didn't know how it was going to turn out. I had her come by, and at the time it was just MIDI notes, and she was just interpreting the notes and just singing the melodies that I had written for those songs, but there weren't lyrics at the time. And it blew my mind, like the way she approached the melodies. I mean, it just blew my mind. And so obviously the next step was to add lyrics. The one song, Travel, is I speak Chinese. So Travel originally, because I was auditioning a different vocalist, and she told me, she's like, well, if you want lyrics, if you want vocals, you have to write lyrics. And at the time I hadn't met Lin yet. So Travel, the lyrics are actually, I wrote them. That's the only lyrics on the album that I wrote, because they're in Chinese, and it was challenging for me. And as soon as Lynn got on board, I said, you're in charge of the lyrics, which I think is cool too. I mean, if you're going to be singing them and you write them yourself, I think you'll have a deeper connection to it, perhaps. So she wrote the lyrics to the songs. And then when we finished recording it, I mean, it blew my mind. Like I had no idea it was going to be the result that I heard. And at that point I said, we need to make an album. You know, it's too special. Like if it's just like a little EP or something, you know, it might just kind of go under the water and nobody's going to notice it. But if we make like a full album, I think it could have a bigger impact. So that's what we did. And we wrote 4 more songs, and some of them were kind of already had like little bits written here and there. But then the 4 songs later were the Prejudice Mountain, Euphoria, and Farewell. Those are the 4 songs that were written after. And then again, it was all written instrumentally, and then you know, I put vocal melodies on it, and then Lynn came in again, and yeah, just killed it. You know, blew my mind again, and that's how it went down. And then yeah, it was amazing because I'm a big fan of Devin Townsend. I think his music is so great. It's just there's no limit to, you know, as far as I could tell, there's no limit to what, you know, his sensibility, you know what I mean? It's very eclectic music. It's super dynamic, and I love music that's dynamic. And that was one thing that I took into consideration with this album. I really wanted it to be dynamic, but to make a long story short, you know, so obviously I knew about Inside Out music because I love Devin Townsend. And when I was a kid growing up in the 90s, you know, a teenager and stuff, I worshiped Dream Theater, and there was a lot of bands like The Gathering. I don't know if you know them. The from the Netherlands, they had a female vocalist, and Lacuna Coil came around in the late 90s. And I kind of dug that at the time because it was different. You know what I mean? I mean, I grew up traditional metal, you know, like I was obsessed with Metallica and, you know, Pantera, Sepultura, you know, all those bands. But when I heard, like, that kind of took me by surprise. I remember in the late 90s hearing like heavy music, but with like a female vocalist that wasn't screaming or, you know, kind of, but had like a more ethereal kind of vibe to it, melodic kind of thing. And I just thought the contrast was really cool. So that always like had like, you know, an effect on me. So it was amazing. So obviously I knew about Inside Music because a lot of those artists that I used to love in the 90s are with them now. The Gathering, but Annika, the singer, she has her own, you know, she has her own project with them, and Devin Townsend, and now Dream Theater's on them, Liquid Tension Experiment, you know, a whole lot of artists and bands. So, you know, I went to the website and I just saw that they don't even take press kits anymore. That, you know, I guess they, you know, they just say, just send the, you know, if they even check it. You know, we might have got lucky, to be honest, because I think they get flooded with so many emails on a daily basis, you know, bands sending their demos and stuff and albums and stuff, that maybe some of it goes under the radar. I don't know, but anyway, I had sent them a link. I temporarily posted a couple songs because that's the only way they accepted it. And about a few days later, after emailing Inside Out, then Thomas Weber, the head of Inside Out, just responded to me. And I at the time, I almost forgot that I had emailed them because, you know, when I emailed, you know, what are the odds, you know? And Thomas, I could, you know, he was really intrigued by the music. And then, you know, we had a couple emails back and forth, and he was really nice and, you know, wanted to know more. So I uploaded the whole album to you know, one of those file transfers, and he listened to it, and he's, you know, he was blown away by it. And, you know, eventually we did a video call, and, you know, I could tell he was really, you know, moved by the music just in my speaking with him. And that made me feel really good. You know what I mean? Like, it was just such a genuine interaction. You know, it's like, you know, here's us. We wrote this album and this music, and it was really trying to be as genuine and you know, authentic and from the heart. I mean, really, that's really what it comes down to. And we did make an effort to try to make something that was new. And I think we achieved that, something that's different than a lot of music, you know, especially in the heavy, you know, so-called heavy scene, or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, we had such a great conversation, and then he asked us if we'd be interested to side with his label. And of course I said, you know, hell yeah. I mean, this is like to be on the same label with so many bands that I used to that I used to that I still do, you know, in many ways, you know, idolize, you know, and now here I am on the same label with you. I mean, it was kind of mind-boggling, you know. It took me some time to kind of wrap my mind around it. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of the the story behind, you know, how everything went down in the beginning. But yeah, and now here we are, and we just had the second single release, which is Mountain, and so far the response has been really great. I mean, I was checking out YouTube, and even Thomas contacted me and said he was, you know, pleased with it, and kind of intrigued that the music was kind of, you know, kind of throwing people off a little bit, which is interesting. You know, I've heard comments like strange, but I kind of like that. Like if someone says the music sounds strange, I kind of take it as a compliment, you know, because it is. It's like there's a lot of it I think is weird and strange and surreal, but you know, but I think there's also some stuff in it that's very familiar. You know, it's not so alien, I think, the music, you know, it's but anyway, you know, I'm just grateful that it exists, you know, and whatever happens, you know, you just do your best, and, you know, hopefully, and hope it resonates with people, and, you know, and just be grateful that, you know, where we're at, you know, and, you know, so that's kind of the short and nitty gritty of the story behind it.
Nice to hear. There's a lot of things came well. So now nice to hear a lot of the story, because the next question we'll talk about the Inside Out, but you answer first about how was your encounter with the one of the biggest labels into the metal and rock progressive now, like is Inside Out Music. But
Yeah.
you answered that question. So for the next
okay
question,
well, there you go.
yeah. So it's well known that China was hit hard by this pandemic during the first times, and how perhaps this one has some complications to record the album, to this kind of stuff, because the pandemic restrictions, the quarantines, etc. Perhaps do you have these troubles, or perhaps you afford these kind of problems with other matters to record this new album?
Okay, well, actually, instrumentally, the entire album was completed right before the pandemic broke out. Instrumentally, the album instrumentally was completed in the beginning of 2020. I remember we were finishing up the bass tracks when we heard the news. Actually, there were some guitar tracks that weren't finished until about the summer of 2020. And that's about when the vocal tracks were all finished up. But aside from the drums, we recorded everything ourselves. And, you know, the drums I did in the studio, but the vocals, thankfully, we have a lot of friends here who have recording studios, and we were able to borrow really nice microphones, expensive microphones, and you know, so we had access to nice gear, and we did everything ourselves. And so the pandemic didn't have such a huge impact on it, except for when it first broke out, because in China, I would say February and March, those 2 full months, basically everything was shut down. That's when the pandemic first broke out, and you know, you couldn't really go too many places outside of, you know, your immediate area. Yeah, it was pretty much shut down. And then things started to open up again in April. And as soon as started things to open up and we could move around, that's when Lynn and I got together and we finished the final 4 songs that needed the vocal tracks. And then I had a long time friend of mine, Chris Badami. He lives in New Jersey. I grew up in the United States in New Jersey. And I've known him since I was in middle school. You know, at the time he was young too. He was like 18 or 19 or something. And you know, he's been doing. He has his own recording studio. He's a great engineer and mixer and producer. And so I had him. I've just known him for so long. He's a good friend of mine, and you know, he does great work. So he did the mixing. And yeah, so the pandemic, it didn't it didn't have a huge effect. I mean, obviously a little bit. There was some delays here and there. I would say if there was no pandemic, it probably would have gotten done. Maybe the album probably would have maybe finished half a year earlier. But yeah, you know, because we recorded most of it ourselves, you know, the recording process didn't, and most of it was done before the pandemic. It didn't have much of an effect. It was mostly just the last 4 songs, you know, that we had to wait a little while before Lynn could finish, you know, recording those.
Nice to hear that. That's nice. So, as you said, you have a lot of influence, like Dream Theater, like Devin Townsend. Well, you love these kind of bands. But when I hear completely this one, I as you said, and I am d'accord with the all comments that I read in your both videos, that the music is weird, strange. It's not difficult to digest, and the first here. So, but this kind of matters for me is especially like, because I love this extreme music for like this. I like this kind of music. So, especially how do you, oh, now with this, I think with this new mix that you did, you have progressive, degen, dissonant, some parts with the drummer with extreme blast beats, this kind of stuff. So how do you describe exactly the music that the listeners will find into this one? Because sometimes it's very difficult to label. This perhaps Ghost has this progressive element, but when you hear Trouble has more blast beats into there, and the double bass with the bass is a very good thing into the band. So it's very difficult to define your style.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I don't know what style it is technically. I mean, I guess progressive rock in the most broad sense of the word would be the most appropriate thing to put it in, because I think progressive rock, it's really a very, very, very broad genre. Like, I mean, you could touch upon so many things in its purest sense. So I would say, yeah, progressive rock, that's fine. But yeah, I mean, if you want how to label it exactly, I have no idea. And, you know, I remember mentioning this in another interview somewhere, or someone was asking me out, and you know, and my reply was, I don't know what it is, you know, and my second reply is, I kind of don't want to know what it is. You know, like when we were making the album and the music, it was really, you know, kind of just removing yourself a little bit from it, and obviously, you know, your own personality and your own things are going to come through it. But I feel like this kind of vibe and whatever it is, like, existed somewhere, and you know, we kind of just channeled it and just kind of tried to make it happen in its most purest sense. So, but yeah, I mean, how to label it, I don't know. I mean, progressive rock is fine, but the album is very dynamic, and that was kind of intentional. Like, we really wanted to make, and I like I said earlier, I love dynamic music, you know, that has ebb and flow and different vibes, and you know, heaviness, and so I mean, contrast for me is very appealing. You know, there are music that I also like that has more of a staticness to it. It's just, you know, it is you know, more of a similar dynamic from start to end, and there's many albums that I love that are basically like that. But I also love dynamic music, and you know, that was kind of an intentional thing for this, you know, for sure. You know, like just the vibe, and between heaviness and cleanliness and dissonance and harmony, and you know, I wanted to try to wanted there to be a lot of elements in there, and just keep it interesting to the ear. You know, yeah. So that's basically.
Okay. So one thing that I got my attention was the cover art, because I think into the cover art is the moon, and into the moon is the face with Lin Wu, I think. So, or who is in the cover art? Is Lin Wu or perhaps other person? And what is exactly the meaning of the name One? Because it's for a long time, and then I never see songs with one word, like travel, farewell, mountain, euphoria, prejuice, this kind of stuff. Mostly of the songs are with 2 or 3 words, not one. And obviously, is this in Chinese language too. So how do you connect the cover art? What exactly means the cover art? The name of the album one, perhaps it's because it's your first album. Who knows? Oh, and with the completely structure of the lyrics, because what one title for a whole bunch of lyrics is a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Well, first of all, the band's name O, which is spelled O-U, originally the band's name was just the letter O. And when I had first spoke with Thomas at Inside Out, I said, yeah, that's the band's name is O. And he didn't say anything at the time, but then later on, because they have a whole team there, and they were probably talking about it. And I mean, I could totally understand. He wrote me back. He said, listen, from like a search engine standpoint, it's just a nightmare. Like if people are going to find this band and the name of the band is just an O, it's just going to be a logistical nightmare. And at the time, I didn't even think about that. But upon, reflecting on that, I realized he's absolutely right. I mean, it's going to be insane. If you just have a letter O, how the fuck are you going to find this band on anywhere? Even now it's hard. So the band and I, why were we O was actually because the 4 of us were all blood type O. That's actually why.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were like, well, that's weird. The 4 of us, we all have the same blood type, and we kind of like the name. We really like the name. And then, but there was this problem. And when he said that, we were first thinking, well, we got to change the name to something else. But the album cover, I'll come back to this in a second. The album cover, because this is in relation to the album cover. The album cover was kind of designed before we had changed the name to the OU. And the vision for the album cover was some kind of spherical thing that kind of like that represents O, like a circle. And that's Lynn. That's Lynn's face. Obviously, there's a lot of effects and superimpositions and stuff like that. And I had this vision of like some kind of sphere, some kind of very mysterious kind of thing, and her face kind of like in this dimension kind of. So that was kind of the concept behind it, just because our name was O. And then later, we loved the name so much, and we didn't want to let go of it. So we wanted to try to find a solution. And in Chinese does have a romanization. It's called pinyin. Basically, the Chinese, it has character. It's a character-based written language. It's like pictorial, if you want to call it that. But they do have a phonetic version that's great for foreigners. And I think most of the kids here, like when they're first studying, when they take language class, they learn this romanization, and basically in Chinese, OU, the pronunciation is exactly O, just like the way we sound, the way it sounded. And there's an interesting Chinese character, which is on the album cover. That pronunciation is also O. And it means like to chant, to kind of sing. It's like it's a little bit more of an obscure Chinese character. So we pitched that, well, what if we just fucking add a U, which is still very difficult. Even myself, I was curious. I was searching like Apple Music or whatever. You just search OU, and it's like it's fucking not easy. So, but they were down with it, so I give a lot of props to the label for like being very supportive of all our crazy ideas, and even the band's name, which from a search standpoint, it's not easy. If you type in OU, I mean, you're gonna get like bands like Outkast coming up first, and you might have to go down a long list of search results before you find it. You know what I mean? So, hopefully in time, if this thing catches on and more and more people start checking it out, and the click rates go up, the what do they call that? The browsing statistics or whatever they call it rise up, however the fuck the algorithms or whatever and all these platforms work, and hopefully it'll start coming up sooner. But but yeah, that's basically the album cover and the name of the band, and yeah,
Amazing.
the story behind it.
Amazing. I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know why I related the cover art with some mythological aspects, because I read a lot of I read a lot of animes. I read a lot of mangas, and I always with Asian culture. I read a lot of these kind of things, and I always be the moon in stories, in stories, in legends, this kind of stuff. That's why I related with some mythological aspects in talking about the Asian religions, this kind of stuff. So perhaps me.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's interesting. You say that, because honestly, aside from music, a lot of the influence of this album and the music of O and the vibe, a lot of it comes from that. Like, I mean, Ghost in the Shell, the original movie, 1995, is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with a lot of Japanese anime, like Akira, Ghost in the Shell. A lot of these like cool, like sci-fi / philosophical stuff, cyberpunk kind of vibe. I mean, a lot of that, like the spirit of a lot of that stuff is in the music that we have. So, and the album cover, subconsciously, there was definitely influence of that. Like, yeah, it's in there.
Okay. Well, the next question goes to with you. How do you recognize? How do you select exactly the voice, the Lin Wu? Because I think when I hear for the first song, Trouble in YouTube with the video, I really, as you said too. So really, your voice and the whole music blew up all consciousness, because I really love it. That's why I try to find the promo digital with Inside Out Music. So I talking with them, they send me, and after that I will buy. Then after that I bought the CD copy. So I really love all of them. So
thank you.
Amazing.
Oh,
so
thank you.
So for that, how do you describe the voice for John Lin? Because the Lin Wu. Because at the first time when I hear the Trouble, I try to mix it like perhaps do you hear this or perhaps do you see this movie Coraline and the soundtrack from Bruno Coalis? This voice like a very child voice, a very girl child, like, but a sweet voice, and this kind of, and with a lot of melodies, but like stories. So when I hear all album, it's like the voice, the Lin Wu, is like a story. She tells a story, growing with each song in a very particular way to sing, because sometimes it's very aggressive, sometimes it's very angry voice, and sometimes it's very sweet. So how do you define exactly? Because it's very difficult to attach a lot of things into the voice with Lin Wu, and especially with the music with Ooh, because I really enjoy this new album.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, her voice is very dynamic. Just like I mentioned with the music, we wanted the music to be dynamic. And when we recorded the vocals, when we were demoing them, I just had written them. I had the vocal melodies all written, but they were just in MIDI. It was like a piano sound.
Okay.
And I left it up to her. To how to interpret the melodies. Occasionally I would give her some maybe suggestions about how I was feeling about it. Like, oh, this part kind of, more, rasp. If you could give more power, maybe this part is more serene. And I just let her do it, and she had a very natural. She just had a very instinctive approach to it, and the way she was approaching a lot of the melodies, like took me by surprise, and I had never expected for it to sound that way. But it was almost always in a good way. You know, it always kind of just blew me away. And yeah, I mean, her voice is, and she's very cool to work with, because a lot of singers, you know, a vocalist can be very sensitive, you know, and rightly so. You know, your instrument is your body, you know what I mean? So when you have somebody pushing you to do certain things and it makes you feel physically uncomfortable, you know, a lot of vocalists can be, you know, a little sensitive, you know, and you have to kind of be careful. Like, you don't want to push too hard. I mean, I never like pushed her too hard, but she was just down to try anything, you know what I mean? And like, she was like, come on, let's go, let's do it. Like, let's go again. You know what I mean? And she's just very positive and, you know, very, very comfortable and nice to work with. Which made the process for me much easier, because when we first met, we didn't know each other before. And, you know, after the first session we started demoing, you know, we spent about 2 or 3 hours, and it just blew my mind. I was like, wow, what the fuck just happened? Like, I wasn't, you know, expecting any of that. But yeah, her voice is very malleable. It's very dynamic, and she's down to try all kinds of stuff, you know. So that's one thing I love that she's definitely down to get that rasp and like that fucking like power, you know what I mean? Like the song Prejudice, like some of that shit she sang, like I couldn't believe it. You know, she's singing like even Dark, that if you listen to the opening sequence, I mean, she's singing these high notes that like you can't believe it. But she's with this power. It's not even like a falsetto. I mean, it's like full voice, and she's fucking belting these notes. It's like, you know, it's insane. It's not like operatic style. It's like, it's just like power, you know, like raw energy and power, and just the spirit of metal in many ways. But you know, with such like focus on the pitch. And yeah, it was the time, you know, it's pretty mind blowing. And the shit is hard to sing, you know, like we've been rehearsing now we meet every week, a couple times every week, and we just rehearse the songs, because for a vocalist to sing with the dynamicism of these songs, it's very, very, very difficult. I mean, because when you're recording, you have the luxury of, you know, do another take, you know, when your voice kind of starts to get tired out, well, that's all for today. We come back tomorrow. We take a couple days and we continue we continue on. But you know, when you're doing a live concert, you have to do everything all the way through. And this shit is, for a vocalist, is extremely challenging to be able to maintain your voice and to be able to do it in a whole concert. So, you know, we're working really hard right now, and she's doing amazing. I mean, you know, a lot of the rhythm, because she's never encountered these kind of complexities of these rhythms. And in the beginning, when we were rehearsing a lot of it, she'd have to have some of the rhythms, some of the vocal melodies, especially Mountain. I mean, the rhythms of those vocal melodies are insane. You know, if you can't really tell because there's no click track, but if you hear the click track with what's going on rhythmically in those verses, especially the verses, I mean, it's fucking insane. And so in the beginning, you know, I mentioned that because in the beginning when we rehearsed, especially like a section like that, she would listen to her main vocal track and just match it, you know, as a reference, you know, so what she'd be singing live, only she could hear in her monitor. You know, this is in rehearsal. But now she doesn't even need that. So like she's getting the rhythms down, and yeah, it's coming along great. I'm just lucky that, you know, we met her and that she's so cool. You know, that's the long and short of it.
Okay. Nice to hear that. So, well, we are very close to in this interview. And what are the future plans that U has for this one? Perhaps a European tour, perhaps an Asian tour, or perhaps an Latin American tour, who knows? Because with this album, I think you will have a lot of doors open because your music is really amazing. So, or perhaps new videos upcoming, or perhaps a new EP next year, who knows?
Well, yeah, basically in the immediate future, there'll be one more single and video released. The tune Farewell we'll have the video is already done, and it'll be coming out in the end of April. And then the first album is released in May 6th. And the album's entitled One simply because it's the first album, and the next album will be called Two. And we'll see how far we can go. 3, 4, 5. We'll see how far we can take it. But then, yeah, after the album's released, we'll of course we want to tour. The problem right now is in China, a lot of the COVID is coming back, and the way they deal with it here is very like zero tolerance. They shut everything down, and so sometimes it could be hard, to move around and do tours. But we're really hoping that it's gonna settle down a little bit. And of course, our dream is to go North America, South America, Europe, Asia. We would love to tour everywhere. And that's the plan. Unfortunately, a lot of it depends on what happens with COVID, because in China, it's difficult to come back. Right now in China, when you come back, you have to do a long quarantine. It's like almost a month of time. So logistically, if we leave China, it makes it very difficult to come back, because of the policies here. So a lot of it is dependent on COVID, but we really hope, we'll be able to tour soon. And then after that, we're planning with, there'll be 2 more records at least with this band, probably more. The second record is already 6 songs in. We're already working on it, and it's amazing. It's gonna be really something interesting. And yeah, and that's about it. There'll be more announcements, of course, over the time. We're kind of, I think this kind of whole thing is kind of just starting out, so we're trying to get the ball rolling, and the website will be more interesting than it is now. Like, everything is kind of just in its very infant stages. But yeah, the plan is, long term, and put out as many albums as possible, and touring, and the whole thing.
Great. So one question that I love to ask musicians like this kind of music, because it's very, as you said, very strange in some ways. So a lot of mixtures into this new album One. So it's perhaps, do you hear about the matter synesthesia?
I'm sorry, what is that?
Synesthesia.
Synesthesia.
Yes. Well, synesthesia means is when a people hear the music, they see colors, they smell odors.
Oh, yes. Okay, cool,
cool. This smell odors. They feel taste, this kind of stuff. So related with this question, and one, as I said, that I love to ask this question to musicians like this kind of music. So what colors, odors, and smells that the listeners will find into this one?
Hey, that's a tough question, because I feel like that every you mean I can only pick one color for the whole album?
So depends on you, because when I asked this question for other musicians, they told me when I see lines, like the guitar from Boybot told me that I see lines, I don't see colors, I see lines. When I asked in a melodic band from US, he told me that when I smell like coffee in the morning, others people say chocolate with milk, other people say nature, a wet, so a lot of things. So you're free to relate wherever you want.
That's really tough. I don't know. For this album, I just, in its most basic sense, I guess I see some kind of energy and light. I don't know what color light, but I guess every song changes for me. I mean, Mountain is kind of white. Dark is obviously, dark. Yeah, that's really tough. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, just some kind of just some kind of energy, just some kind of spirit. That's what I see and feel when I listen to it.
Okay, okay, it's not wrong question. It's not a rans, it's not wrong answers in this kind. This is wherever you feel when this when you hear this question.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, Anthony, what do you think about the digital platforms? Because now the digital platforms is the new wave to hear music. You are from the 80s, and you hear music, a lot more music in the 90s. So this kind of stuff. So how for you the digital platforms like Spotify, Tidal, because with this trend you can hear the music with 1, 2, 3 of maximum 4 songs into the digital, doing the playlist. This new generation prefers to do like hear music like 1, 2 with playlist in 1, 2 songs. So for you, the digital aspects is a good or bad thing for the music, and why the albums now doesn't have the same impact compared to the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s?
Well, that's a great question, and I think you ask anyone, and you're going to get a lot of different answers. For me, like you said, yeah, I'm like a product of the 90s, basically. I was born in the 80s, but my my development and growth, a lot of it happened in the 90s. And all I can say is I'm so glad. Actually, one of the I don't mean to sound negative, but honestly, the more we get into the future here and the 21st century, I'm really so grateful that I lived a significant part of my life without cell phones and internet and all the immediate access that we have now, because I'll never forget that feeling where you actually, you had to read a magazine to find out what was going on in the music world. And you'd hear about your favorite band that was coming out with an album, and it might be 3 months away, it might be a year away, but you'd be so excited when that day finally arrived, and you'd go to the record store and you'd buy the record, you'd buy the CD, you'd come back home and you put it on your CD player, and you just sit down in front of the fucking CD player, and you're just like in bliss. You're just, it was such like a monumental, important thing. You know what I mean? And when I think back on that, like, it's really interesting. I mean, I remember having so many, the first time I ever heard and Justice for All, you know what I mean? And I mean, I was in 5th grade, and that was about when I started really, when I realized music, infected me. And I remember just like, being in class in school, and I would just have like the guitar solo to blacken in my brain the entire day. And like the only thing I could think of that I couldn't wait for was when the school bell rang and we got out of school, and I'd run the fuck home, and I would just sit my ass down in front of the stereo and put on Injustice for All and just listen to it over and over. I mean, I used to go to sleep with some songs on repeat because I couldn't stop listening to them. You know what I mean? And that was the effect music had on me. And like, it's kind of sad in a way, because I wish I had that same mindset that I use, I mean, I'm still super passionate about music, but there was something about that era before pre-digital music where it's like so instantaneous. It's like, and I think that's my answer to the question. Like, I think there's a lot of goodness to it, because like you have access to music instantly, and it's so easy. You don't have to work for it. Like back in the day, in the 90s, you had to work for it a little bit, and even in the 90s, people before me would probably say we had it fucking easy, because at that time you could burn CDs, you could listen to the radio and record it onto a cassette tape if you wanted to, and you know, but still you had to work for it. Like, and I used to listen to a lot of obscure bands, like, you know, relatively, like, you know, for example, let me think of an example, Paradise Lost. And, you know, they were kind of like a gothic metal band back in the 90s. Like, they weren't, you know, the average record store wouldn't have their CDs. So you would have to go there and put a special order in, you know what I mean? And, you know what I mean? And that, but there was like a thrill to that whole process, you know what I mean? And you go there, oh, I want, you know, can you special order the CD for me? And then like a week later, 2 weeks later, the CD comes and they call you and you fucking go and you get it. And like, you just thrill. And it's like so precious, this thing to you, because not only did you pay for it, but you had to special order it. You had to wait 2 weeks. You know, probably most of your friends or most of the people you know don't have this album because it's not so easily to get your hands on. So like, there was just this whole like thrill, and you know, that's just lost today, you know, and it's not coming back, unfortunately. And now that we're getting into the 2020s, which I fucking can't even believe, you know, it's sad. There's a sadness because there's so many kids now growing up who have no idea what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? They'll probably think it's like silly. It's like, you know, you were reading like a actual paper magazine, and you know, you would actually take the time to go to the store to, you know, special order an album. It's like, yeah, I miss that, you know, but it's not all bad. I mean, look, I can hear so much music today that, you know, back then you could never hear, you know, and look now, like we're talking about this album we put out, and if it wasn't for the internet, you know, you probably wouldn't have had the chance to hear it. You know, it's on the videos on YouTube. So I mean, you know, there's different sides to it, but I guess it comes down to mentality a lot, and I have to be careful of myself. You know, sometimes it's like, try not to take music for granted. You know, I mean, good music, if you hear something you like, and I think, you know, it's okay to listen to one record a lot. You know, it's easy to fall into the trap where it's like, well, there's so much music out there. It's like, you know, I don't have time to listen to this record more than once. I gotta hear everything else. You know what I mean? So, but I feel like if you find something that you love, I'm always in the habit of just listening to it over and over and over and over, and then it's hard to peel me away from it to listen to other stuff. But yeah, sorry for my long answer, but yeah, it's yeah, it's a very interesting question you asked, and you know, yeah, I think there's pluses and minuses, you know, which if it's more of a plus or more of a minus, I honestly can't say, but there's definitely something lost to that. I mean, you probably know too, you know, that back in the day, like that feeling of, you know, of expectation of an album, and you had to actually go and buy the physical copy. So yeah.
Well, Anthony, the sad times arrive at this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one as I did, and really enjoyed this chat because you are a wonderful guy. I hope someday we'll see you alive here in Latin America, or perhaps when I travel to Europe to see you, because to Asia is very far from here. So I hope, so congratulations for this first album. It's really amazing. I hope some more people get into, because I love it. As I said, I did my pre-order, I bought it. And
oh, thank you so much.
So perhaps, do you want to add something to your new Latin American fans and METALLERIUM readers?
Well, yeah, I first of all, thank you so much for everything you just said. It's really great, and I feel, you know, really grateful and honored, and you know, thank you so much. Yeah, and I enjoyed this interview as well, quite a lot. And thank you for reaching out. Yeah, I hope the music will find people, and you know, it will resonate with some people, and you know, and if it does, you know, I hope, you know, you can support the band, and you know, forward the music around, and you know, get the word out, and we hope in the not too distant future we can come down to South America and tour. It would be a dream.